Hello and a very warm welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Israel agrees to humanitarian pauses in Gaza to allow polio vaccination for children, which will be carried out in 3 stages, with fighting to be paused for 3 consecutive days in each stage. Kamala Harris vows a tougher approach on migration and supports weapons for Israel in her first interview with a major news organization since becoming the Democratic nominee for president. Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit Mongolia next week, despite the country being a member of the International Criminal Court, which issued a warrant for his arrest last year. China lashes out at a declaration by 18 Pacific Island leaders that upholds decades of engagement with Taiwan. Beijing calls it a mistake that must be corrected. And European and Asian markets rise after a record day on Wall Street, boosted by US data that reassured investors over economic health as they await key inflation figures. Hello and welcome. We start with the developments in the Horn of Africa. Tensions between neighbours Ethiopia and Somalia are worsening further. Ethiopia has raised concerns as 2 of its rivals, Mogadishu and Cairo, forge closer partnerships. Egypt has delivered its first military aid to Somalia in more than 4 decades. This comes after both nations signed a security pact earlier this month. Egypt has also offered to send troops to a new peacekeeping mission in Somalia to fight Islamist terror group Shabab. The new mission is due to replace an African Union peacekeeping force in January, which also includes up to 10,000 Ethiopian troops. However, Mogadishu had threatened to kick out the Ethiopian troops. Now, this is due to a dispute over a port deal that Ethiopia signed with Somalia's breakaway region, Somaliland, in January. Under the deal, Ethiopia would gain access to Somaliland's port, and in return, it agreed to become the first nation to recognize Somaliland as an independent nation. Somalia called this deal as an attack on its sovereignty. Since the deal was signed, Somalia has drawn closer to Ethiopia's other rival, Egypt. Egypt and Ethiopia are also at odds for years now over the Addis Ababa construction of a vast hydro dam on the headwaters of the Nile River. Egypt has long viewed the massive $4.2 billion dam as a threat to its fragile water security. Egypt has also condemned Ethiopia's deal with Somaliland, and it has ramped up military cooperation with Somalia. The Ethiopian Foreign Ministry on Wednesday accused Somalia of colluding with external actors without mentioning the military aid it received from Egypt. Ethiopia warned that a new African Union-led mission for Somalia could worsen tensions in the volatile East Africa. Somalia has ruled out Ethiopian troops participating in the new peacekeeping mission if the deal with Somaliland is not cancelled. Now, these developments come as efforts to resolve the dispute between neighbours Somalia and Ethiopia are ongoing. Somalia's close ally, Turkey, has facilitated indirect talks between the neighbours. A first round of talks concluded in Ankara this month, with all sides noting the progress. And a third round of talks is scheduled in Ankara on the 17th of September. Will the East African neighbours be able to resolve their tensions? Now, for more on this, we have with us Yusuf Bilal, who is an expert on the Horn of Africa. He is joining us live from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, what are the strategic motivations behind Egypt's decision to send military aid to Somalia after more than 4 decades?
Well, the Egyptian decision comes as a result of a bilateral defense agreement between Egypt and Somalia that was negotiated and signed at the request of Somalia following the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Ethiopia and the de facto state Somaliland, that is not recognized by any government within the international community. So this memorandum of understanding that gives Ethiopia access to the sea. We have to keep in mind that Ethiopia, since the independence of Eritrea and in 1991, became a landlocked country. It has some commercial access through the port of Djibouti, but what Ethiopia has been seeking is to have a kind of sovereign use of the coast, which on the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean, that would give Ethiopia a kind of military use and naval use of the coast, which it didn't have at the moment with commercial access to Djibouti. So we have to understand and keep in mind this first as the motivation for why Ethiopia was signed that first agreement with Somaliland, with the promise of recognizing Somaliland as an independent state in exchange of Ethiopia's access to more than 20 kilometers of coastal land and with a quasi-sovereign use of that access to the sea. And it is in reaction to that, Somalia signed 2 military agreements, one with Egypt and the other with Turkey. And it is part of this bilateral agreement that Egypt is sending those troops. Now, Egypt obviously has its intention with Ethiopia for at least the last 10 years over the issue of the building and the filling of the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam. And given that tension over the use of Nile waters, this is a way for Egypt, on the one hand, to respond to the request of Somalia, because at the end of the day, Somalia is an independent state, is a sovereign state. If it has a military deal with Egypt, it is in a position to make that request on a bilateral basis. And for Egypt, obviously, there are strategic considerations related to putting more pressure, obviously, on the Ethiopian government regarding a number of strategic issues, and the most important being the use of the Nile water.
Right. And Yusuf, what are the potential implications for regional stability and security in the Horn of Africa following this military aid from Egypt to Somalia?
Well, there are at least 3 major implications and risks given the current tensions between the 3 countries. First, there is a common regional threat. It is a transnational threat, which is the threat of Al-Shabab, which is like the equivalent of Taliban in Afghanistan at the time for 20 years. So there is a serious risk within the region, and particularly the countries that have a border with Somalia, meaning including Ethiopia, Kenya, and other countries in the region like Uganda, like Djibouti, and so on, Eritrea, and so on, that can face cross-border operations against their territory by Al-Shabaab. So the current tensions do not serve regional cooperation against this threat. The second issue is that we have is that Ethiopia may react, and it has one card in its tool within hand, which is how it will use the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, because then it may also react to the Egyptian position in that regard. The other aspect is if Ethiopia, if there is, given that Ethiopia has a very important presence, it's the most important military presence in Somalia in fighting Al-Shabab, if Ethiopia reacts also to that by a unilateral withdrawal of its troops, it may weaken also the fight against Al-Shabaab. And overall, what we have is increased militarization of the region, and this is not boding well for the next few weeks, given all the already tense situation in Sudan, with the civil war in Sudan, with the tensions in South Sudan. So you add to it also what is happening in the Red Sea with the war in Gaza. All this mix is a kind of macrocosm of the current military and security upheavals that the world is living today.
In the region. Right. And Yusuf, just finally, how is the international community, particularly the African Union and neighboring countries that you've mentioned, responding to Egypt's military support to Somalia?
Well, the African Union now, the main issue, what is at stake, is the mandate of the new peacekeeping mission, because the current African peacekeeping mission, or more precisely a kind of peace enforcing mission, which is robust, which is in a position to conduct offensive operations against Al-Shabaab, its mandate is ending this December, in 3 months' time. So, and at the moment, the mandate of the new peacekeeping mission that will replace ATMIS, the current mission based in Somalia, to which Ethiopia is part, is being negotiated. And the key question here, if there is an opportunity to de-escalate the tensions, is to have a discussion and cautious mandate, new mandate of the new mission. And the key question here is the component that is related to Somalia, that at the end of the day is based on the agreement of the sovereign of Somalia as a sovereign state. But you also have a regional dimension to this peacekeeping mission, and here there is room for Ethiopia to be part also of this mission. So the current discussions around that mandate are key to de-escalate the tensions and have a political solution to the current military rivalry between the different powers.
Yusuf, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Thanks for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
You're welcome.
Shifting focus to Libya now, the North African country continues to face mounting tensions of rival administrations, threatening to end a 4-year period of relative peace. The crisis over the control of Central Bank of Libya between the Benghazi-based Eastern administration headed by Khalifa Haftar and the Tripoli-based Western administration headed by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah threatens a new bout of instability in the country that is a major oil producer. Now, in the latest, Libya's oil output has fallen more than half amid the ongoing dispute. Production of about 700,000 barrels a day was offline, and exports were halted at several ports. Libya's National Oil Corporation, which controls the country's oil resources, said that the average output stood at around 590,000 barrels on Wednesday. Libya pumped about 1.18 million barrels per day in July. It says that total losses in the past 3 days after the Haftar-led administration announced the closure of oil fields was at about $120 million. Haftar's administration, that controls nearly 90% of Libya's oil fields, has vowed to keep oil production shut off until the UN-recognized Presidency Council and the Tripoli-based government in the West reinstate veteran Central Bank Governor Sadiq Al-Kabir. Libyan Presidency Council, headed by Mohammed al-Menfi, dismissed al-Kabir on the 18th of August. Now, this move was rejected by the eastern-based House of Representatives Parliament and Khalifa Haftar's force called the Libyan National Army. The violent contest between the sides on the central bank chief has exacerbated the economic crisis in the country. The interim governor of the bank, who has been appointed by the Presidential Council, says the situation will be under control in the coming days.
We stand by the citizens regarding everything. Let me be clear and honest with you. I feel sorry that a minor disagreement leads to closing organizations, shutting them down, and stopping salaries for the people. Unfortunately, I don't want to dwell on the subject, but we have taken steps to correct the situation, and hopefully, within the next 2 or 3 days, everything will be in our hands and under control. I want to reassure the Libyan citizens on this matter.
However, this reassurance has not been enough for citizens who have been troubled due to cash shortages.
Enough, give us our salaries and fix our country. The youth are lost. Many have turned to drugs because of you. You steal our money and live luxuriously abroad while we study in the worst schools, where even the bathrooms are non-existent. Elderly women are sick. Sadiq, Al-Kabir, leave.
I swear to God, when you look at the current situation in the country, they've shut down the central bank and left people in a terrible state. Just look around, the shops are empty, there are no services, nothing at all. They've cut off electricity, cash is scarce, and there's even a shortage of gasoline. They won't let us move, live, or work. Honestly, I have no idea where they're trying to take us.
Regarding the liquidity issues and the struggles citizens face due to cash shortages and disruptions in banking procedures and services, honestly the problems began with the decision to impose a 27% tax hike by Sadiq Al-Kabir. There was no need for this, and as a result, we saw a rise in prices, a cash shortage, and the public suffered. Even the use of cards has become limited.
Sacked Governor Sadiq Al-Kabir has been targeting Dbeibah government in recent months. He has accused Tripoli of overspending and mismanaging the country's oil revenues. The Dbeibah government accuses him of favoring the forces in the east. Now, Libya's central bank dominates its economy. It not only owns the 2 main commercial banks, but also holds $27 billion in reserves, most of it from oil revenues. It is also the only globally recognized depository for Libyan oil revenues, which is a vital source of income for the war-torn country. The United Nations and the United States are pushing to convene an emergency meeting of the rival parties. The UN support mission in Libya has called both sides to hold talks and for reopening Libya's oil fields immediately. The UN says both sides must refrain from using the country's primary revenue source for politics. Moving on to some tech-related developments, Elon Musk-owned satellite internet service Starlink is expanding in Africa after facing several regulatory concerns. The American tech giant services have been launched in Botswana and Ghana. Now, in Botswana, the launch comes 3 months after the firm secured its operating license from the Communications Regulatory Authority in the African nation. Now, this approval was granted after a year of back and forth with the regulator. Starlink had initially submitted its application for operation license in early 2023. However, the Botswana regulator rejected the application in February of 2024, citing missing information. Situation escalated further when the telecom regulator banned the use, sale, and importation of Starlink kits. Now, this created uncertainty around the service's future in Botswana. However, in May of this year, Botswana's president met with Starlink executives in Texas. His intervention led to the approval of the license. Starlink's entry into Botswana is being seen as a game changer, as traditional service providers in the country have struggled to provide reliable connectivity. The satellite-based service is expected to offer high-speed internet, especially in remote and underserved areas. Now, Starlink services also launched in Ghana, where it is seen as a milestone. It is expected to connect more Ghanaians to the global digital landscape and to provide the country with a robust digital infrastructure that supports socio-economic growth and innovation. In Kenya, the American satellite internet provider has introduced a rental option for its internet hardware. The services were launched in the East African nation in July this year. The new rental option will allow customers to acquire the necessary equipment in installments. Now, this initiative aims to make Starlink services more affordable for Kenyans who previously faced significant upfront costs. Ghana, Botswana and Kenya are among the growing list of African countries where Starlink has expanded. Now, these include Benin, Mozambique, Nigeria, Madagascar, Eswatini, Malawi, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and Zambia. Despite the expansion, the broadband service faces several regulatory challenges in Africa. As per the industry analysts, regulators across the continent are worried about Starlink because they want control over the content being shared. This is why Starlink has been struggling to open even in South Africa, where tech billionaire Elon Musk was born. Now, Starlink had to disconnect its service in Cameroon in April following a government order that cited a threat to national security and fair competition. The satellite company has also been blocked from approval in the Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Senegal. Apart from the regulatory challenge, Starlink also faces concerns over high subscription costs and the service potentially pushing local internet providers out of business. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgence Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our story today is from Senegal. The farmers of the West African nation have started using social media platforms to promote and sell their produce. Now, these apps help them to expand their client base and to boost sales. It also helps them to do away with the middlemen and increase their profit margin. The use of social media networking platforms has opened new doors of opportunity for Senegalese farmers. Our next report gets you the details.
When you hear of a farmer, the first image that comes to your mind is that of a person toiling in the fields, protecting crops from extreme weather, birds and animals, or someone herding cattle. Well, that's one side of it, and a rather conventional one. But in the West African nation of Senegal, you would see a different image. Things here are changing for the good. New age farmers of Senegal are tech savvy. They follow a modernized approach using social media to manage their produce. Farmers in Senegal have access to online platforms that help them take their produce from the farm to the market with just a click.
Salam alaikum, yéen ñi bëgg mango Dakar donc mango Kent kilo 400 HLM Grand Yoff, livraison gratuite à partir de
30-year-old Mame Abdou Diop is one of them. Diop shoots TikTok clips to sell and promote his straight out of the farm mangoes, with a hope to encash his growing following on the short video app to boost his sales.
I was just making the videos for fun, and I didn't even know the impact social media was having. But lately I've had a lot of clients, especially from Europe, who, even from a distance, see what I'm doing.
And that did end up happening. Diop has more than doubled his client base. People from across continents have approached him to buy his yields.
Thanks to the videos I make, I've added double or triple the customers to my regular customers. So for me, social media is something more. So it's very good marketing.
The use of social media marketing has helped sellers do away with costly middlemen, which in turn has increased their profit. And it's not just the sellers who benefit from these social media platforms, even buyers benefit from direct dealing.
I was scrolling through Instagram, and that's when I saw his post. I saw that he was selling mangoes at an affordable price, which was a bit convenient for me because I process them and sell them back with a profit margin. So I saw the quality, contacted him, and he delivered on time.
The agriculture sector represents roughly 16% of Senegal's GDP. However, it employs 60% of the labor force. The industry also suffers from chronic underperformance. Senegal imports almost 70% of its food requirements. The Senegalese government has now prioritized attaining food sovereignty and aims to create more jobs in the sector. And the rising use of social media apps helps the government's initiative. The use of social media marketing in one of the most conventional sectors has widened its horizons. It has generated new employment opportunities in a country that's plagued by youth unemployment. Senegal now has agri-influencers. These farming experts use networking platforms to find clients. They help them in areas of land development, commercial production, and fruit tree planting.
I consider myself an agri-influencer, yes. I consider myself as such since I publish activities all the time, and it's only agricultural activities on plant production. When I'm out and about, I take my phone with me. I take photos, I take videos, selfies, maybe snap, and then I publish them on social networks to show my activities. Sometimes I do Instagram boosts, and that's how people contact me for field visits, to follow up on their orchard or farm.
The social media fever is not restricted to just Senegal, though. Farmers from other African countries, including the Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Gambia and Mali, now have access to information and clients across borders. And their creativity has opened new doors of opportunities.
And that's a wrap on this edition of Firstpost Africa. Thank you for watching. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Have a great weekend and goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual. My name is Utsav Parekh and here are the top stories of the day. Israel has agreed to a 3-day humanitarian pause in Gaza starting Sunday. According to the World Health Organization, Israel has agreed to pause the war for a polio vaccination drive in the war-torn strip. The WHO aims to vaccinate